Hi, everybody. We are back again with another episode of the Coliving Innovators podcast, where we bring the co-living stakeholders and founders from around the world to talk about the different aspects of the co-living business. Today, we have with us George Ahye from Urbanbubble. He heads co-living at Urbanbubble. We'll get into a bit of detail on his journey and how he came to being into the co-living ecosystem. But welcome, George.
Thank you for having me, Mike. Pleased to be here.
Amazing. George, it'll be great if you can give our audience a little bit of your intro so that they can get to know you a bit better before we get into everything else co-living.
Yeah, sure. So, like you say, I'm head of consultancy and co-living at Urbanbubble. Urbanbubble's a residential property manager in the UK. Started about 16 years ago with a right to manage company. The founder, CEO, Michael Howard and Claire Howard, still owners of the business. So they grew that business, the leasehold side of things, to 10,000 homes in the UK. About 8 years ago, we got into build-to-rent operations. And so today, altogether, there's about 20,000 homes that we look after in the UK. And that's England, Scotland, and Wales. And that's across leasehold, traditional lettings, build-to-rent, and co-living. And so co-living, we're the property managers for the Folk Co-living brand, which is owned by DTZ Investors. We got involved, right at the start. They've got 3 schemes in London: the Palm House, which is in Harrow, Sunday Mills, which is in Earlsfield, and Florence Dock, which is in Battersea. So, we've helped create the brand, and we're the property managers for those schemes. I've personally been in property management for 10 or 11 years now, in build to rent for 8 years, at various different roles, couple of different competitors as well. So I've got a fairly good understanding of UK build to rent and also now co-living.
Amazing. I think that's a lot to unpack from where you have been and how you see co-living. So, okay, let's take a step back and if you can take us through what your perspective has been on where the co-living ecosystem of UK currently is, and how do you see it?
Yeah, so co-living is pretty institutionalized in the UK. I guess the stuff that we look after is institutionalized anyway. Co-living you can consider as, from a typical traditional HMO with shared bedrooms, and then it evolved to more of a large-scale purpose-built model with the collective. And then after that, it's kind of evolved quite significantly in what it is today, which is things like folk co-living, brands like that. So what is co-living in the UK today? So, purpose-built, large-scale, compact studios of 18 to 30 square meters, lots of shared spaces, all bills included for residents, and a key part of which is where I guess it's owned by institutional investors and operated by large-scale residential property managers. So we specialize in schemes of 200 homes plus, and we have a 24-hour on-site team. And in the UK, that's kind of where we're going towards in terms of the sector.
All right, so it's pretty interesting because when I speak to co-living founders from around the world, when I see Europe, it's more founder-driven co-living. It's more from a digital nomad perspective, and there are urban co-living operators also which are institutionalized. But the more you read about co-living in the European continent, it's more driven by the lifestyle side of the businesses. And when I go to Southeast Asia, it's more affordability driven. Again, there are operators, but the institutionalization has not yet happened. But in UK, it's totally different, where we see that the institutionalization has happened and a lot more investors. So I was reading this Knight Frank report, which came out in September before this conversation, and it said that since 2020, £1 billion has been put into developments of various co-living schemes around UK. And that's amazing because the kind of potential and the response that this... So I write everything co-living newsletter every week. and I go through the co-living news around the world. 60% of the co-living news that I read is from UK, and it's okay. This permission has been given, co-living plans approved. So even if you open BTR News today and just go to the co-living section, it's all about this got approved, this got approved, this got approved, right? So I think a lot of investors are also taking active interest into this asset class, which has evolved into being called a co-living. Give us a little bit of insights on who a typical audience is, right? When we say co-living, like who are we building it for? Are we building it for young professionals, or are we building it for people who are already established and into their third or fourth job? Who are we building it? Who is the typical person who is living in these co-living spaces in UK?
So if we look at our residents, I'd say 75% are between 25 and 40 years old. Pretty equal split of male and female. 50% are British nationals and 50% internationals. 25% move directly from abroad, with the other 75%, most of that moving from within London. Obviously, the three schemes being in London. So there's some co-living that's in the regions as well. And so I assume what they find is maybe a similar sort of thing, but instead of moving from within London, it's from within the city that they're already in. So it's people looking for a better alternative of renting in the city they're already in. And it's interesting you say about, obviously we had a conversation not too long ago, and you gave me a great overview of what's happening in the world. And yeah, the UK again is just very institutionalized. So CBRE suggested that in Q1 this year, of all of the investment into operational living, for example, build to rent, 25% of investment was in co-living, which is amazing. And this is billions of pounds going in. So it's really great to see. There's definitely a lot more work that can be done. And for me, this, co-living is for mostly single households, single individuals who are in any sort of industry. We have a huge mix of people from creative industries. It's not just your typical digital nomad, of which we obviously have, but it's creatives, it's accountants, it's quantity surveyors, it's people in retail, any sort of person you can find. And what I'm seeing is people choose co-living. They're not necessarily searching for co-living. They're searching for a rental option that is in a central location, that's well connected, and that is good value for money. So when I say good value for money, I'm talking about yes, it's the monthly price is a bit less than if you were to rent your own private studio, but also you get that 24-hour service with an on-site team that you build genuine, relationships with. You have parcel management, you have a gym, you have co-working space. It's a full package, and it almost aids toward health and well-being and a decent lifestyle. And importantly, also you get the community aspect. And so what I find is that in the UK, people are choosing co-living for its practical means, and they're being pleasantly surprised by the community aspect.
It's interesting that you say that, because a lot of other people focus on community first and then everything else later. And I've always been, it has always been a bit counterintuitive to me, because while I was running my co-living business in India, it was always about location and price first. And then the retention used to happen because of community. So the selection of a place will always happen on price point and the location, because the accessibility to their offices or their colleges or the universities, plus the price point should be right for them. So that is why they were selecting us, but they were staying back, and they were staying back for longer period was because of community, because we were building on, and they found good friends that they could spend their life with. I'll just give you an interesting anecdote, right? While I was running, we found one very strange data point. We used to measure a lot of things while I was still running it. And one of the things that we measured that, so in India, the gas connection, for the cooking gas connection, you have to get separate gas cylinders for cooking gas, and then put them into the house. What we realized is any home which had a replacement frequency of less than 45 days, the people stayed a lot more. So it basically meant that if people are cooking together more, they're staying together more, because food is like when people have food together, they're more than friends. They're just more than acquaintance. They kind of become friends and they end up staying longer. And that kind of created the first point of our understanding of community back then in 2015. So I think you struck a very right chord, that it's about location and price first if you're building in an urban setting, and then community is what keeps people interested in the space. It helps you to retain them, for them to stay longer.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we do, don't get me wrong, we do have some residents that search for co-living because they know what it is. You know, often people coming from abroad, because in Europe it seems like there's, like you
Yeah.
suggest, there's many more smaller kind of digital nomad set up, small community type things. So they're probably looking for something similar, and then they come to a scheme of 300 homes, and it's slightly different, but has the same sort of, you know, offering, I guess, the community, the decent rooms and homes. So yes, it's a really interesting insight though.
Interesting. So, okay, one of the other common question that I keep getting from a lot of people that I speak to in the UK ecosystem is what the hell is the difference between a co-living, a BTR, a PBSA, a HMO, right? So if you can share your perspective, because everybody has different, whoever I speak to has their own point of view on this, and I think it'll still take a decade more in order for all of us to come up with certain definitions. But I would
Mm.
love to know what your perspective is in.
Yeah, so an HMO, house of multiple occupation, is about how many people are sharing it, one self-contained home. So that tends to be, what does an HMO look like? It tends to be a shared townhouse with a private landlord. You do have some professional HMO landlords, but it tends to be in the UK, I believe it tends to be individual landlords with one or a few of these homes. They split them out into rooms, they rent the rooms out on ASTs. You've then got PBSA, so that is purpose-built student accommodation. So it's for students only. It's like it says in the name, it's large scale, it's purpose-built. They tend to be clusters. So you have a couple of co-living schemes, what's considered co-living in the UK, which are under the cluster model. So clusters being, you have rooms with a shared kitchen, like an apartment, like a 4 or 5 bed apartment. So that would be considered as a self-contained unit, each apartment. You then go to co-living. So co-living is a bit more of a mature and private version of PBSA, and obviously for not strictly students. We do have a small student population, but actually most are, like I said, between 25 and 40, but the age range is 18 to 68. So it's a bit more of a mature and private version where everyone gets their own compact studio with a kitchenette, a bathroom, so everything they need to call it their own home, as well as lots of shared spaces like a large master chef style kitchen and dining room, gym, co-working space. So the schemes have cinema rooms, games rooms, laundry room is obviously essential because our studios don't have washing machines in each home, so we can manage the size of the apartments. So that's kind of co-living, and co-living is also all bills included, like I mentioned before, similar to student. And then you get to build to rent. So build to rent is, from what I know, an American sector. It's called multifamily over in America. It looks a bit different to it does in England. So in America, it tends to be 3 to 4 story kind of garden apartment developments that are professionally managed, institutionally owned. Built to rent is a rental product. Exactly that. It's a professionally managed rental product that offers, more services than an HMO, for example, or just an individual house that you'd rent. And so in the UK, we call it build to rent rather than multifamily, depending on who you're speaking to. Some companies use the term build to rent to describe everything we've mentioned: co-living, multifamily,
Multifamily.
PBSA. Build to rent, the word is kind of interchangeable in the UK, but the way we see it is build to rent is, we see that as an urban multifamily scheme. And then you've got single family housing as well. And just going back to build to rent, so that tends to be, studio 1, 2, 3 bed apartments in central city locations. Yeah, on-site service, you still get lots of the shared amenities. And then, but no bills included. So you usually, the residents usually have to pay for their own council tax and utility bills. So it's more akin to traditional rental versus co-living. And then you've got single family housing, which is basically built to rent, but individual houses rather than apartment blocks. And then you've got later living, which is basically built to rent for seniors. So I think the idea is, and we're still at really early stages. So in the UK, there's 100,000 built to rent homes. It's about 1.8% of our rental market. In the US, it's about 45% of their rental market, or 47%, I think I saw. So we're still really early on. And what I'm finding is, if you're in the build to rent industry, you can't avoid it. Like, it's so obvious that this is the thing. But for the vast majority of people in the UK, they won't know what build to rent is. They'll just know there's that amazing scheme with a swimming pool.
No, so I was reading another report, and it said that because it's increasingly becoming difficult for people to own the homes, a lot of the housing that's going to happen in the next 50 years, next 5 decades, will be built to rent, because institutions will put in money to create these spaces, which will be then rented out to people like us who cannot own homes, and they will be happily stay there throughout their life. Like what's happened in Germany. If you look at it from a housing sector perspective, a person who takes the home, for their life they stay on rent. Nobody thinks about buying the place, and most of the real estate is owned by institutions. And I think in US it has gone that way. I think in UK also it's going that way, because of whatever is happening from an economic perspective, from the lifestyle changes perspective. This, I think, you call it build to rent or you call it co-living, I think this whole rental sector, the private rental sector, is gonna increasingly become more and more lucrative for investors, and more as a good option for people who just want flexibility and still want a place to stay. So I think that's where we are moving towards.
Yeah, and I think it's a lifestyle as well. You know, how much would an apartment be to buy if it was in the locations where these build to rent schemes are? If it was the quality of them, because they're high quality, if you had a gym, a swimming pool, concierge, just unaffordable for the vast majority of people. And so I agree that there's so many factors to the challenge that we are seeing in the UK. And there's a compound housing shortage, and has been, forever, I think. You're right, it's becoming increasingly harder for people to buy a home, and more stressful. The deposits need to be bigger because the house values are going up. Individual landlords, private landlords, are also leaving the market because of tax changes. So they're not able to claim as much, on their, it looks like they're making more profit now, even though it's, the numbers are the same. So what I'm seeing is a lot of individual landlords selling up their properties, which means less rental options as well. It's interest rates obviously being quite high compared to the last decade. I mean, before that, interest rates were higher than they were now, but what we're used to is just, 2-3% interest rates. Now they're at 5-6%. So it is much harder for people to buy a home. And a lot of people don't have the money, either monthly outgoings or the upfront deposit. So they're going to rental homes. These individual landlords are leaving the market because it's not profitable for them anymore. So that means there's what choice do you have? And, traditionally, I think landlords don't have the best reputation in the UK. That there are a huge number of fantastic landlords, but, where you hear some stories about landlords not looking after their homes. So it makes it pretty difficult for people to choose, find the right thing that meets all their needs. And so institutions like global investors are the only ones that are going to be able to deliver homes at scale, especially because of these small landlords leaving. They're the only ones that can deliver the much needed rental homes at scale. And thankfully it's it's a great product as well. It's in the good locations. It's really, well run, high quality, sustainable. So I completely agree. I see the UK as becoming more of a rental market, which is great for us.
Yep. All right. So while we're talking about UK becoming a great rental market, can you also delve into the demand side a bit, right? You said that the instances of people who are searching for co-living has now increased. So I was looking at Google Trends of the word co-living in UK, and you can clearly see a increasing trend on people searching for co-living rather than directly searching for a shared apartment or an HMO or a room to rent. What are the key drivers which are driving this demand purely from a co-living perspective? Do you have any insights from your operations at Urbanbubble and Folk Living, that why people in UK are increasingly searching for some or the other kind of a co-living arrangement rather than the other asset classes?
It's interesting because renters aren't searching for specific asset classes. Renters are they have a list of what they want and they're searching for that. They go on Rightmove or Zoopla or whatever it is, and they search for location first, and they set their filters for price, and then they see what comes up. And it'll be a mix of traditional, it'll be build to rent, it'll be co-living, because all of these sectors advertise on these portals. So I find that vast majority of renters aren't actually searching for a specific asset class. And then when they inquire and they hear about what we have to offer, they're pleasantly surprised. Then they come and have a look and they're like, wow, like I didn't know this existed. People say that quite a lot. So I guess it comes back to the practical means for the vast majority of people. Is it close to work? People don't want to travel a huge amount to work. Is it close to work? Is it well located? Co-living in particular doesn't have a lot of parking. So we encourage public transport. So it has to be close to key train stations. And then they look at price and they look at, are they comfortable? Are they happy to trade off 20 square meters for more shared space and a lower value rent? So it's still very practical in my view.
Yeah, but I one trend that I've seen, and I think it is gonna grow stronger, because right now people may not know something like this existed, as you said, but when they are now experiencing it, they're being more vocal about to their friends, to their families in their circles, that hey, something like this exists, and hey, you should try it out if you're going there. And this is kind of snowballing effect which is building up. And I think in the next decade, of like 5 to 10 years, we will see a lot more people directly looking for co-living rather than looking for a rental space. And I think that's where we are today. But I agree with you that it starts with being practical right now. But once they see the product, they experience it, they become vocal about it. Because again, in the report that Knight Frank wrote in September, they said that 92% of the people who are staying in co-living would refer other people to the same space very, very happily and very, very proactively. And their customer experience has been great. And I think it echoes with what you are saying, that they're presently surprised with what you have to offer. And then once they are done and they want to move on, they make sure that other people know about that something like this exists.
Yeah, I mean,
Cool.
referring people is one of the top 5 source inquiries for us. So it does work, but at the same time, there's 7,500 operational co-living homes in the UK, which is something like 0.0001%. So even though it's not like this is a viral TikTok that's going out, it's the word of mouth spreads quite slowly, because moving house as well is not something you just jump on and change and move house because you want to test it. Like, it's a huge decision. So I think the word of mouth is really important, but we're still seeing mostly people don't know about it and they're searching for practical means, and then they're really pleasantly surprised, and then they're talking to their family and friends.
Understood. So, recently, I think last year, London also released its first policy of large-scale purpose-built co-living spaces. But most of the people who I have spoken to either look at, I think, C3 or sui generis as the planning permission for their co-living setups. So, do you think there are still a lot of regulatory hurdles from if somebody wants to establish a co-living brand in let's say London or regional centers like Manchester, Oxford, and otherwise? What are your thoughts on where the regulatory and the policy setup should move from a co-living perspective?
Yeah, and so I think you're referring to Policy H16 of the London Plan.
Yeah,
London Plan. So that was updated this February as well. And so I think the previous version, it was done through consultation, and the previous version was much more like PBSA. So they suggested kitchens on every floor, really set, really overprescribed stuff. I think it was one washer dryer between 5 residents. I mean, that would just be, we have 300 homes that would just be crazy. So the update in February is much better, and it's I know key players in the industry were involved in that consultation, so that's definitely something to refer to, and it works well, but it's still guidance, guidance only. It's not the regulations. So I guess the challenge is in the UK that there is a challenge with planning and that guidance, because different councils, even in London, have different views on it, and different boroughs across the UK have different views on it. So some boroughs would prescribe, it has to meet the minimum space standards of 37 square meters for a studio. But that's not what co-living is. Co-living is a trade-off. It has to be a trade-off to work. You have to reduce the private space to allow for more shared space. And that encourages more social interaction. And like that, it's the foundational part of what the sector is. So I think there's lots of work to be done with normalizing co-living, large-scale purpose-built co-living, with inviting policymakers to learn about what good co-living looks like, and that it is an essential part of the housing strategy in the UK. I saw a report the other day that said there's 600,000 potential co-living renters in London alone. And that is people that meet the demographic of between the various age ranges, the salary brackets, the being single households. So, and that's in London alone. And there's probably like 5,000 co-living homes in London, if that. So there's definitely work to be done when it comes to encouraging the right national policy to encourage more investment into the sector.
All right. Okay, so now let's do a little bit of an exercise. So suppose I'm a person, I want to start a co-living space, let's say in London. What's the first thing that I should look at? Let's go through the process of, because most of our listeners will be people who would want to start their own co-living business at some point. So if we can take them through the process, I think that'll be a great value addition for them. I'm a person, I'm currently living in London. I've rented a space, I live in a rented space myself, but I want to start a co-living space because I've lived in one and I know the benefits that it gave me. And now I see a business opportunity. So what's the step number one for me to look at?
So I think for context and transparency, I'm an experienced large scale operator. So I don't have first-hand experience of setting up a co-living business. And I think if it was an individual or a small group of people that are wanting to do that, it wouldn't be at an institutional level. It would be starting off small with HMOs. So it'll be looking, I guess, finding that first of all, having a vision is really important. What you do, and a purpose. What are you doing this for? And once you have a clear vision of what you want to provide and how you want to make people feel and who you want to attract and your purpose, then you can think about looking for a house, looking for a large townhouse where you can just make it a bit unique and bring your purpose into it. And I think starting off really small, so either investing or finding an investor to buy this house, or you can do it lease to lease models. Maybe you're doing a bit of work in there to kind of brand it or put your own touch on it, and then renting it out and testing everything and failing loads and learning and then eventually you'll get to a point where you're pretty comfortable with the operation, of this one house. And then you look to try and move to 2 houses and 3 houses. And I think that for entrepreneurs, that seems like the best way to do it. If it comes to institutions, then you need to find an architect and a developer with a good opportunity, a good piece of land, or an office to repurpose, and then get operators involved really early so they can provide some operational input to your design plans, and then design it and then deliver it. Get the operator on board really early. Brand creation is really important when it comes to institutional. In build to rent, we tend to see, it's interesting because PBSA tends to have an overarching brand that is well recognized, and then lots of individual schemes, whereas build to rent, some have an overarching brand, but most are actually individual schemes. And then co-living, it seems to be more brand, like PBSA. So again, think about whether you'd rather go down the overarching brand perspective or whether you'd like individually branded schemes.
So just to kind of summarize it for the listeners, find your vision, purpose, find the target market that you want to serve, think about it, put it on the paper, start looking out for either a house or a small HMO, which can be, you can get an investor to buy something, or you can get it on a rent-to-rent model, and then just start operating, because you will make a lot of mistakes, you'll learn from it. But while you're doing all this, focus on creating a brand, because in co-living, brand has a lot of value that it brings on table. And then you do it for one house, like 1, 2, or 3 different setups, and learn from the operations, and then take it from there. And if you are looking from an institutional perspective, then you get an architect or developer, a piece of a property, which can be an existing home, or it can be an office which can be reconverted, or a land for that matter. Get operators involved to get an operational input from their experience, and then deliver it and kind of start working on it, right? And here also the brand becomes very, very important for us to look at.
And I think a key part as well for both models is that it's essential that you understand the regulations needed to be a landlord, especially for smaller entrepreneurs where they're not using a big operator. It's essential that they're doing things by the book, and it's essential that they do a lot of research in terms of the operating model, and specifically the processes and also the costs. So having a really clear budget of what you think it will cost versus what sort of rents you think are reasonable, and then they can see if it's viable. And it might be the case of finding 100 different opportunities, but only 5 of them are viable and only 1 of them goes through. So lots of research.
So basically, it's like building an Excel spreadsheet, which gives you a clear understanding of what your costs are, what the potential rent can be, and if it makes the unit economics actually makes sense. So if you put all of that into
themselves, so
yeah, that's true. That's something, that mistake a lot of I did in my initial year of being an entrepreneur, that you feel that this is you, both of you are one, and then you start overlapping a lot of things, and which becomes a problem later during your life. All right. Thanks a lot for that. There are last 2 things that I kind of want to discuss. One is around the technology in the co-living ecosystem and what has been your experience, because we've seen a lot of people who embraced and spoke a lot about technology fail, whether it was We Live, whether it was Common, whether it was Selena. a lot of them focus too much on technology. So I just wanted to get your insights into how do you see technology in the co-living business? Do you see it as an enabler? Do you see it as something which is must have? Or do you see this? How do you see the technology involvement in the co-living evolving in the time to come?
Technology for us is an enabler for operations. And so my understanding with some of these, companies that you mentioned is their core product is the technology. Our core product is the home, the rental home. And so that's the big difference. We've got something physical that you can rent out and that we know there's going to be demand for, and the OTA online travel agency like Booking.coms and Airbnbs and any competitor or Rightmove or Zoopla in the UK and or on the market, that's a really tough market to be in because there's such big companies in there. So I think, having a tech business in that sense is going to be quite challenging. But we have a property business, it's a real estate business where we're managing people's homes and we're managing that journey. So when I think about technology, it's about how can we make it easier for us to deliver a great service. So from the marketing perspective, how easy is it to tell people what we have and to facilitate inquiries and to manage that inquiry process so it's really efficient? And then as people go on for a tour, and how easy is it for people to apply online? And then once they've moved in, how easy is it for people to communicate to us in whatever means they want? How easy is it for people to book amenities or to, raise maintenance requests? And so we use technology for that. Yes. Yeah. Go on.
No, so basically, what I was trying to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the objective number one of technology use is to improve operational efficiency so that the cost is reduced from an operational perspective, and you can serve more and more end users with the same number of people in the team. That's objective number one. Objective number two is how I can make the experience of an end user better and easier and more sticky. That's the objective number two that you spoke about. And objective number three is how do I make sure that I keep everything together, whether it's information about the space, whether it's the website, whether it's the inventory within the home, whether it's something getting like a tenant raising an issue and then me solving it. How do I keep all aspects of my business together at a single place to make sure that I deliver the best of customer experience? Is that correct understanding of how a co-living operator should look at technology?
Definitely. I think they should think about the resident journey and think about what technology is needed to deliver a basic level of service, a better level of service, and the best level of service. So I guess it's also, you explained it really well. You can also look at it from the resident perspective and then the building perspective. So what's the resident journey look like, and what tech do you need to enable a decent journey? And then for the building, for regulations, compliance, for all the checks that you have to do, firstly, what do you need to do in the building, and the tech should enable you to be able to do it seamlessly, efficiently, and like you said, storing all the data in one place so it's easily available.
Cool. Amazing. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Thanks for sharing that. The last bit of it, and I think we'll be done then, is what are your suggestions for upcoming co-living founders, right? What would be the top three things that you would advise them from your perspective?
Do loads of research. Just do loads of research. Speak to you. You have a great understanding of the global market, a really unique perspective I found as well. I'd say whichever market, whichever country you're looking to open up in, just do loads of research. In the UK, there's tons of it available from the likes of Knight Frank, Savills. So try to understand where it's come from, what it is today, and what good looks like today. And then speak to as many people as you can. Just reach out, ask for people's advice, ask for their story, try to find someone who's done it before, maybe who's even now setting up their first site or even considering it. So find people who are interested in the sector and try and speak to them to again learn. It's all about learning until you feel confident enough to be able to give it a go. And then the third thing is, I heard something really interesting quite recently, which is excellence through execution. And what that means is it's important to plan up to a certain point, but the most learning comes when you actually do stuff. So I'm a huge planner. That's one of the things I do. I plan loads, I prep loads, I organize loads. And so it's important for me to realize where it's like the law of diminishing returns. Like the thing isn't going to get better because I'm going to think about it more now. Like I just need to get on and do it. So I think also just do it. But bear in mind, some things you do need to have absolutely right, such as the regulations, and so you need to make sure that what you're doing is completely legal and and right, but also just go ahead and do it and see what happens.
Perfect. With that, I think we are towards the end of this podcast. I absolutely love the conversation. A lot of actionable insights, a lot of insights into the UK co-living ecosystem. I think I would love to do a follow-up episode probably in the next few months once we have a lot more developments in the UK ecosystem. But thanks a lot for taking our time and spending it with us. I think people will love it. I'll put your coordinates in the description so that people can connect with you directly. So yeah, thanks a lot for taking our time and talking to us.
Thank you.
Industry-wide change, it's a collective dream. Collaboration, cooperation, that's our theme. From multi-generational homes to global scenes, we shape the future, living out our means. Each story unfolds with the art of code, lessons in the lows, wisdom untold. Ask your questions, join the conversation. Together we build a resilient foundation. Resilience, innovation, the keys to thrive in the Coliving movement. We come alive, from struggles to triumphs, we pave the way. In our global article community, we find the sway.